Um, Family companies are always complicated because you've got a lot more complex relationships than you do in any other type of business. On the plus side, with a complex business such as publishing, where there are so many different aspects to it, getting started at a young age and being able to see all the different aspects of business is very useful, because you do need to be able to understand the different tensions that there are in any publishing company, particularly between sales, who want everything now, and production, who don't want to release anything until it's ready, and kind of the editorial aspects of that. So being able to see the whole shape of the business over many years before having to actually work there full time is very handy. Also, publishing it's such a people business, and it's so much about discussions and conversations that having a web of people who you know already can enable that. Another great aspect of the family business when you're a children's publisher is that you get to exploit your own family for underage labour. So every time we have a children's book coming up, I send it off to my kids, I ask them questions, I get them to read it, and sometimes they even come back with suggestions for plot changes or characters who aren't quite as good or as bad as they should be, or maybe for what illustrations would improve a book. So pretty much every aspect of the family comes into the business. Well, the first tip I would say, and this is something that everyone in publishing will say to people who want to come in, there's a lot more to publishing than editorial. I think everyone who wants to get into publishing thinks, I'm going to be an editor, I'm going to sit in a lovely quiet room, and I'm going to delicately work on the fine details of dotting the I's and crossing the T's of this beautiful author's work, and that is a part of what we do, but actually most people in publishing aren't editors. Most people in publishing are in sales or production or marketing or distribution or all the other things, and particularly in a small company you do get input into the books, you do love the books, and you do play a role in how they come to be and where they go, even if you're not an editorial. And that's something that people very often forget, and in fact a lot of people who do end up in editorial don't start in editorial, but conversely people who start in other areas thinking that maybe editorial is their thing often end up realising, actually I'm not very good at that particular thing, or I wouldn't like the isolation or the singular focus that sometimes editorial demands, and actually I prefer to be more of a team player. I prefer to be working in a larger group, and I prefer to be meeting people, I like to be on the phone and all that type of thing. That is the first big thing I would say. Second thing I would say, particularly in Ireland, is it's a very small community. We all know each other. And that can make it really hard to break in. And that's not due to badness or anything, it's because we're small companies running on tight margins. Every job that we do has to be done well, and you're always going to preferentially give that to someone who you already know and already trust. That's really unfortunate. It makes diversity a particular challenge for us, but you do need to get to know people. Go to launches, go to events, go to festivals, walk up to people, shake their hand. Once you've done it 2 or 3 times, then you can start into the next stage of the conversation. But there is that hurdle to get across. So don't be surprised if without that you get constantly knocked back. Third tip, patience. Takes time. Takes time. And because the companies here are so small, it's very hard to get in at anything like a high level. So if a job opening comes up that looks like you might be able to do it, give it a go. Try it. It might be for you, might not be for you, but you do have to wiggle your way in a little bit. Kids books and adult books in some ways are just the same. A good book is a good book, and sometimes children's books can be ghettoised a little. It's particularly frustrating in the area of reviews and stuff, you know, where about 1/3 of the shops that sell in bookshops these days are children's books. Look at the review section in a newspaper. 10% and you're doing well. I can see you're shocked to hear that it's that big. Children's books are growing, they're big. They're also not at the front of the bookshop where they should be, seeing as how big they are. So that's one aspect of it. But in terms of the process of actually creating the books, children are much harsher readers and much harsher critics than adults are. I've been given novels and told this is a really good book and 100 pages, and I'm going, where is the good book here? I'm not seeing it yet, and I will persevere. A child won't. After 3 pages, if they don't like it, bang, comes straight back. So actually writing for children is really hard. You've got to be on your game right from the first word. Against that, you have to, as an author, just write the book and tell the story as it needs to be told, not thinking, well, an 8-year-old boy is probably going to be interested in this type of gag. If you're overthinking it like that, it's not going to work. So you have to think about the reader at one level, but you can't build the book for that reader. You have to just tell a damn good story. There's some of the main differences from a publisher's perspective. You're probably going to be illustrating a children's book more, even a book that's primarily a book of words. You might choose to add details, whether it be a chapter start or whatever. And you have to take a different approach to the cover as well. I suppose every book has a different cover approach, but children's books, you've got to very much look at what's out there, what are the messages that children are getting, what are the genre signs, the genre identities that they're used to picking up on, and how can you pick up on those without it looking like something that it's not. It's particularly complicated when you get to children's fiction. You know, someone like Jacqueline Wilson can get away with all of her covers looking the same, whether they're for an 8-year-old or a 15-year-old, which can be quite scary sometimes. But for most of us, when you bring out a children's novel, you've got to make sure that it doesn't look like an adult novel, or doesn't look like something that's for kids too young. So actually pitching to the age is complicated, and the rules change and swerve all the time. There's always a role for the author, and there's a role for the marketing team, and when things work well, they combine and enhance each other, obviously. Social media divides people a lot. Some people don't do social media, and that's absolutely fine. If an author is the type of person who doesn't do social media, then you just take that into account, because trying to force someone to do social media, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever, when it's not a natural fit to them, it just comes across as fake, and it doesn't do anybody any favours. It's important from a publishing perspective to know where your author stands on that. So if there is an author, a prospective author, who has a significant Twitter profile, you'd want to know that, and you'd build it in. When you're talking about children's books, of course, you'd want to be very clear, is that a Twitter profile that appeals to children or parents, or is it not? Would it be actually inappropriate to allow that to become associated with the books that they write? And sometimes you might encourage an author to actually divide their Twitter profile between author and normal human being, because the messages that you put out and the communications that you make can often be quite different in those fora. It's undoubtedly true that an author with a profile will sell more books, whether that profile is on social media or physical presence or print media or broadcast media. They're all important. And what we have found consistently over quite a number of years now is that the books that sell best in their 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th year are the books with authors who are out there, whether in the case of children's books, visiting schools and libraries, doing festivals, or in adult books, possibly, maybe a journalist or appearing regularly as panelists or whatever, or doing walking tours. People who sell their own books generate an awful lot of the market themselves, and people who market their own books similarly generate the noise that draws people into bookshops, that gets books sold. So profile is hugely important, but it's absolutely not a one-size-fits-all. I have to say, this year I'm absolutely gutted that we didn't do Lynn Ryan's book. She's someone I've been watching for years. I just thought it was maybe a little bit early to approach her to do her book, and then I discovered Gil already had. I was like, damn! Such an important story, such an amazing woman. Whatever about the finances and everything, it's just a type of book that we would love to be associated with. Like, we've just done Alice Leahy's book. That's the right thing to do. It's not about the numbers, it's about the book needing to be out there. And I'm really disappointed that I didn't pick up the phone to Lynn Ryan a couple of years ago and say, you need to do a book with us.